Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your audio amigo, here today with another episode of Thrifty Tunes. Today we're looking at the brand new bullet style IEM from Moondrop. These are the Quarks 2. So, these are Moondrop's most recent and cheapest IEM, priced just at $17. As you can see, they're bullet style, and they have a DAC amp inbuilt with the USB C connector. The original Quarks were priced at around $12, $13, as low as $9, $10, depending on where you shopped. They were considered some of the best cheap IEMs money could buy. Do these continue the legacy? Let's find out. We'll go ahead and get started with what's inside the box. The packaging is extremely eco-friendly. I really like that. The cardboard box, all that's inside it is a cardboard insert holding the IEMs, and underneath is the permanently attached cable. You then get a little baggie with the 3 sets of included ear tips. You get small, medium, and large. And that's it. I don't really care at this price point that the accessories are very bare bones. I'm actually more impressed that other than that little plastic bag, the entire packaging is recyclable, which I really like. So overall, not bad. So because these are bullet style IEMs, the cable is not removable, so it had better be good. This one is okay, I guess. Because it's bullet style, any microphonics in the cable are going to be amplified up straight into your ear. Thanks to the rubber coating, it isn't terrible in terms of microphonics, but you will hear it brushing against facial hair or clothes or up against a desk, but it's no better or worse than other bullet style IEMs in terms of microphonics. You can wear these sort of ear hook style, where you wrap the wire around your ear and wear it kind of like a normal IEM. If you do that, it completely mitigates any microphonics, but in this case, the side effect of doing that is that if you wrap it around your ear and put it in like that, the microphone winds up next to your cheek as opposed to down closer to the entrance of your mouth where it should normally. It'll probably impact sound quality. I'm going to go ahead and put some recordings taken from the microphone in both positions here.
Thomas was a tank engine who lived at the big station. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He was a fussy little engine, always pulling coaches about. He pulled them to the big station, ready for the big engines to take out on long journeys, and when trains came in and the people had got out, he would pull the empty coaches away so that the big engines could go and rest. James was a new engine who lived at the station at the other end of the line. He had 2 small wheels in front and 6 driving wheels behind. They weren't as big as Gordon's, and they weren't as small as Thomas's. "You're a special mixed traffic engine," the fat controller told him. "You'll be able to pull coaches or trucks quite easily." But trucks are not easy things to manage, and on his first day they had pushed him down a hill and into a field.
So those were the recordings. The cable has no chin slider. I'm not really a fan of Moondrop's hard plastic Y-split that they put on some things. I'm not a fan of it on the much more expensive Stellaris, and I don't like it here any better. The inline controls are also housed in a hard plastic shell. You get volume up and down, you get a center button for play, pause, and to summon virtual assistants, and there's a little hole on the back for the microphone. Overall, the cable isn't really anything special in the world of bullet IEMs. Just be aware that if you damage the cable, you'll have to replace the whole thing. As far as construction and build quality goes, I feel like these are fairly typical for bullet IEMs at this price. You've got molded ABS shells, and the backs are made out of what feels like a sintered powder metal material. The nozzles have metal filters on them, as well as a black spongy mesh material on the inside for some tuning purposes. The back is covered in a bunch of holes. There's some plastic here at the bottom where the cable connects, and honestly, that's about it. Even though those holes are in the back, these are actually really good at sound isolation, provided that you get a good seal. For something this small and light, the IEMs themselves actually feel pretty solid in the hand. I'd still be careful with these because if the cable gets bent or shorts out or something, it's game over. So even though the IEMs themselves may be sturdy because of the cable being permanently attached, maybe be a bit careful with these. So let's go ahead and pull up the specifications. It's pretty typical for a bullet IEM. These are lightweight, single 7.8 millimeter dynamic drivers. One good thing is that you'll never need to worry about amplification for these since they come permanently attached to their own DAC and amp. The nozzles aren't enormous and they're a decent length, so you can customize your fit depth however you like. Overall, there's not much to say about these in terms of specifications. They're fairly standard. Alright, so let's throw these up on the cool wall. It's difficult to design bullet style IEMs to be particularly cool since they're very small and utilitarian by design. Uh, I don't think I like the sort of matte bare metal centered look. I don't think it was a good choice. It makes it look like they've already been worn in or they've already started to oxidize. And I don't think that it's a particularly good look to have that straight from the factory. As I've already mentioned, I really don't care for the cheap looking Moondrop Y split, and I don't really like the hard plastic on the microphone and the controls. So I'm gonna throw these as being my first ever uncool IEM. I don't think that there's much merit to these designs. It's very utilitarian. They're just, in my opinion, uncool. Maybe I'm being too harsh on them, but maybe I'm not. Let's see what the Council of Ladies has to say about this. So see, I wasn't being too harsh. Hardly any positive sentiments in terms of if these are actually pretty. They wouldn't get you any compliments at all, and there's no available colors, so let's see what they have to think about these. I did kind of agree that these look slightly medical equipment-ish, if that makes any sense. A couple of my ladies are in the medical field, so it would make sense that they would think something like that. But yeah, overall, these are uncool. So, what about comfort? So, because of the microphonics, I chose to wear these earhook style. Worn that way, I had no issues beyond the cables not staying behind my ears because they don't have molded ear hooks, but that's a fairly minor issue. Overall, with a deep fit, these disappeared into my ears and I had no issues wearing them for long periods of time. My wife strongly dislikes bullet style IEMs. They tend to fall out of her ears and get pulled out with minimal effort. She wore these sort of over the ear style as well. And as long as she was wearing them over the ears, they got a pass on the tiny ears test. The nozzles aren't overly huge, they're extremely lightweight, they're comfortable for long periods so long as she uses the ear hook style way of wearing them. Overall, I think it's a very good showing in terms of comfort. Okay, let's talk sound quality. Bass. The bass is probably the weakest part of this set for me personally. The bass quality here is quite good. There's excellent sub-bass extension with no roll-off. The little DDs have the response to pull off low notes when needed. Macklemore's Can't Hold Us isn't missing the low bass notes like it can in some other sets, but for my taste, the hits lack a little punch and rumble. They're not actually lacking in the playback, I wish it was a little more exciting. 4-string bass guitars and kick drums are audible and have nice detail, but again, they feel a bit pushed back in the mix for my liking. The kick drum and bass in Plush by Stone Temple Pilots is a good example. The kick drum and bass guitar are there, you can pick them out in the mix, but for my taste, the hits and the notes lack a little authority. Overall, the bass isn't bad. I think this is probably what I would call my bare minimum of bass quantity. I would like more energy down in this area, but that being said, the quality, considering it's a single 7mm dynamic driver, is actually really good, and the sub-bass extension makes for a very natural and accurate playback down here. So bass, not bad. As I keep saying, particularly with these single DD sets, one of the benefits of having a more subdued mid-bass presentation is a more focused and forward mid-range, and this set is no exception. The mids here are perfectly natural, no coloration, no unnatural tonality, just overall clean. The Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge sounds excellent. Vocals, guitar, bass, drums all sound great. No extra emphasis on anything to where it feels unnecessary. It might sound a bit boring to some folks who are used to a more energetic tunings where the bass or the vocals are emphasized or where things are overall a bit more warmed up, but it sounds very clean. It's a very detailed replay with no real masking, thanks to the fact that there's no huge sub bass boost. Yeah, there's no troubles with separation either as far as instruments go. Female vocals are more of the same. They aren't overly forward, aren't overly recessed. Rocio Durcal's Amor Eterno sounds powerful and passionate without overpowering the rhythm guitar or the gentle strings playing in the background. The rich tonality that makes her voice so iconic isn't touched by the bass or the treble in an unnatural way. It leads to a replay that, again, sounds very natural and clean, if a little uncolored. Overall, the mids are a great, neutral, balanced presentation with no glaring issues. I think it's very good here. Like the mids, the upper mids and treble are, again, neutral and clean. The upper harmonics for cymbals and keyboards are crisp and sharp. The cymbals and hi-hats in Fleetwood Mac's Dreams sound correct. I feel like there's just barely enough energy here to keep things sounding exciting, but not so much as to cause fatigue or washy tonality. This set's replay of Pierre Henry's Psych Rock was bright and energetic, but it didn't tire my ears out. I actually thought it was very crisp. I think it's a testament to that piece of foam that they stuck in the nozzle. Or is that? Yeah, I think that's doing good work, because these small drivers can be quite shrill if you don't control them, and I think Moondrop did a very good job with the tuning on this. The tones in Pierre Henry's Psych Rock, as well as the way they move back and forth across the stereo stage, can easily cause treble fatigue in spicier sets, and I did not get that in this set. It was sharp but not piercing. It was crisp but not fatiguing. It's very good. I think the upper mids and treble is the star of the show as far as this tuning goes. It presents as being bright and exciting without overstaying its welcome. I think it's very well done. So, let's talk technicalities. Due to the size of the driver and the design of the enclosure, low-end details suffer a little bit, but not as much as you might think. Louis Bellson's bass in Duke Ellington's version of Take the A Train is very subtle in the playback, and I don't feel like I'm really losing any of the finger texture and the ringing of the strings on some of the notes. It's further back in the mix than the rest of the band, but the detail's there if you really listen for it. Do I wish it was more forward? Yeah, it would be easier to pick out. Someone who maybe never heard the song wouldn't be able to on the first listen, but this is a very neutral playback, and it works. The mid and high range details are very well presented and easy to pick out. I played Independence Day by Chris Steele and Brad Meldau again. This set was great for that kind of detail. The subtle squeakiness of the mandolin strings combined with the sound of the fingernails hitting the soundboard. This was a great replay. Didn't feel like I was missing anything. Don't go into this expecting a technical showpiece. It's $17. This is still a tiny DD in a closed-in enclosure, but I feel like Moondrop helped it along with good cavity design and good tuning. Stereo separation here is good. The Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet has all the instruments in the correct ears without anyone sounding too claustrophobic. These IEMs are a bit more isolating than the other pairs I've tried, partly because of the bullet-style shape, and one of the consequences of that is you lose some stereo separation and perceived soundstage. While the stereo separation on this set isn't too badly affected, the 3D soundstage, in my opinion, is a bit below average for IEMs. There's enough energy in the upper mids and treble to open up the stage a bit more, but even on wider mastered tracks like the live version of Waltz for Debbie by Bill Evans Trio, the soundstage sounds solidly inside your head. I don't consider this a huge downside, especially considering the sound isolation that these IEMs provide over their peers. So while the soundstage might be inside your head, the stereo separation and imaging are actually pretty good. So I'm going to add a section here because these are a DSP IEM. And DSP IEMs can have a lot of added value if they have an accompanying app that lets you tweak the DAC. And I think this is the first real big stumbling block for this set. I didn't expect the Quarks 2 to work with the iOS version of the Moondrop Link app because nothing works with the iOS version of the Moondrop Link app unless it's the Bluetooth stuff. Apple has locked down the USB C implementation and it won't let you reprogram the DSP through that port for reason. What I didn't expect is for the USB C DSP function to not work with the Android version of the Moondrop Link app. So this is my ancient Sony Xperia X Compact that I use as a digital audio player sometimes, and I have the Moondrop Link app on here, and it works perfectly with my Moondrop May. I can plug it in, I can adjust the settings, I can change the sound. It all works fantastic. I plug in the Quarks and I'll put up some screenshots, but nothing. I can't see it. I try to convince it that it's a DSP cable and it doesn't work. It doesn't recognize it. It doesn't work. And I feel like this is a real shame. Moondrop is one of the few companies to have a good functional DSP implementation. And on Android, it works perfectly well. But no support for the Quarks 2 at launch means that they're really not considering the DSP in the cable to be a real benefit or selling point. Because if they did, I felt like they would have baked in maybe one or two profiles like they did for the Chew. One thing I will say about this is there have been some complaints of people with the Dusk and the May of DSP noise while using this cable. I did not get any egregious noise during my testing. There might have been a little bit there on some USB-C ports, on some quieter portions of tracks, but it wasn't enough to distract from the music, and I feel like overall, this compared to the cable that came with my Moondrop May is less noisy, so that's one positive there. Okay, time for some comparisons. So, after listening for these for a bit, it didn't take too long for my brain to go, hey, these sound a lot like the original 7Hz Zero. And yeah, they're actually quite similar in terms of overall presentation. But after doing some volume match listening, which was more difficult thanks to that DSP cable, the Zero I find to have a bit more bass presence, and they have a bit more sparkle in the treble. I personally don't find either of these sets fatiguing, and other than a little extra upper end detail and some more bass kick, they're very, very similar in overall tonality. The Zero are available with a DSP cable, so that you can match the USB-C compatibility of these, but even with the USB-C cable, neither of these two sets works in a DSP app where you can provide extra DSP tuning. The only difference here is that if you do get the DSP version of the Zero, the cable is removable, so you could put on a normal 3.5mm cable and play it with other things. With the DSP cable, the Zero are also $9 more expensive than the Quarks, so that's another thing to consider. Moving on, I have another DSP-enabled bullet-style IEM. I have the Tanchjim ONE. The Tanchjim ONE are the most expensive of the three by a decent margin. These are $28, but they're a bullet-style IEM with a DSP cable and an app that actually recognizes them and lets you tweak the sound. Now, stock tuning on the Tanchjim ONE is not a match for these two at all. This is much more V-shaped than these, which are more sort of neutral bright. But if you select the natural preset in the Tanchjim app, they become much more similar. The one has flatter, less natural sounding bass to my ears, but DSP app, just kick that up to match these, and you can easily make the one sound exactly like the Quarks 2 or the Zero, or really any other single DD IEM in this price range. I will say the cable on the Tanchjim ONE is replaceable, but I could not find anywhere that sold it except for Concept Cart, and they don't ship internationally. In addition, the recession on the Tanchjim ONE is quite deep, and I tried a couple of cables and it wouldn't really fit. So I think the only real replacement cable is going to be this stock one. And like I said, unless you shop at Concept Cart and they ship to your country, you can't get one. So you'll still have no real benefits of having a replaceable cable, unlike the Zero 2 where you can fit pretty much any 3.5mm cable. So, overall speaking, the Quarks 2 are the smallest and the cheapest, but also the most sonically limited. The Zero 2 is the pick for folks who maybe don't need a DSP implementation, or for those who want the DSP but with a more traditional IEM form factor and shape. The Tanchjim ONE might be the most expensive, but they're also sonically the most versatile. They also come with a nice carrying case. It's, okay for the money, but that's something to consider. Real quick, I'd like to give a quick honorable mention to the Moondrop Chew 2 DSP. It's $7 more than the Quarks, but it actually works with the Moondrop app, meaning you can tune it exactly the same way you can tune the Tanchjim ONE. It also has the same metal shells and carry pouch that the Chew 2 has. But whether or not it's worth that extra money is up to you. Overall, I think these three, this one with the natural preset, sound very similar, and they sort of offer different perks, if that makes any sense. But that's enough about the competition. Let me get these guys out of the way and go ahead and put these up on my Audio Amigo Arbitrary ranking scale. I like the Quarks too sonically. They have a crisp, bright sound. They fit in basically anyone's ears, and for people who use their phones as their primary media device, the USB C is highly convenient. The biggest problem with the Quarks 2, in my opinion, isn't the fit, it isn't the look, or even the fact that the app doesn't work. It's actually the price. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the original Quarks had an MSRP of $13, but really quickly after their launch, you could find them on sale for less than $10. At $17, the Quarks 2 are playing in a much more competitive price bracket. I feel like they do fill a very narrow market niche for people who want a tiny bullet style IEM with bright neutral tuning and don't want to carry around a dongle all the time. But unless that perfectly describes you, I'm finding it difficult to find someone who I would recommend the Quarks 2 to over, for example, the DSP version of the Zero or the Tanchjim ONE. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this in the good tier. They don't do anything really wrong except for the Apple implementation, but that's not the IEM engineer's fault, that's the software engineer's fault. They sound good, they're comfortable, they're built solid, and they'll fit in anybody's ears, but other than that specific niche of people that I mentioned earlier, I have a really hard time recommending these over other things in this price bracket. So I sort of spoiled the answer there, but do I recommend these? Well, if you're looking for a small, comfortable, affordable, bright, neutral, tuned, bullet-style IEM with a USB-C connector, then this is your pick. Other than that, I can't really recommend it. If all you want is a cheap IEM to use with a phone, then you can pick up the KZ EDC on sale for $8, add together an $8 Apple dongle, and there you go. It's a more versatile choice at the same price range to what more people would what more people would say is a more crowd-pleasing tuning. If you want DSP features specifically, the Moondrop Chew 2 is $7 more, comes with a much nicer accessories pack. And if you want the neutral bright tuning, then hey, the 7Hz Zero has a DSP version. And finally, if you want bullet style with DSP, then the Tanchjim ONE might be more expensive, but it actually has a functional app and you can tweak the sound however you want. I feel kind of bad for the Quarks too. They sound good, but they just aren't competitive at their current price. If down the line you can find these for, I don't know, less than $13, then I'd say that they're probably worth it. At that price, they're cheaper than the KZs with the dongle, and having to pay an extra, $12, $15 for the Chew 2 DSP or the Tanchjim ONE DSP, it becomes much harder to swallow a 100% price increase versus a 30-50% price increase for the level and performance. But that's going to do it for me today. It was a bit of a quick one. Since it's bullet style, there's less stuff to talk about overall, but I hope I still did these enough justice and answered all of your questions. It's an interesting little set. I feel like it's let down by the software team and the pricing, so hopefully they end up on sale soon at a price where they make a little more sense. But as always, if there's an IEM you'd like to see get the Thrifty Tunes treatment, let me know down in the comments. I appreciate all of your support. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch you all next time.